Hello, everyone. So my chapter four presentation is basically the principles of um, part two. So basically, we're gonna get started here. I'm just trying to share this real quick and start the beginning. Okay. So mine was chapter four principles, part two, pages 60 to 81. So basically, a little quick overview of the 20 principles we had in this chapter were um, kind of discussed by the earlier or by the first part of the chapter. And so I just want to get a quick review of the chapter. And so basically, the idea here is to focus on teaching methods, lesson planning, and training for teachers. When using these ideas, it's important to rely on research and theories relevant to that subject. So what we are focusing on this part of the chapter is basically format presentation and monitoring and assessment. For format presentation, basically, it is a good way to guide teaching and design courses. We need to follow certain principles. These principles should be based on research and ideas and should be broad enough to work in different teaching situations, which are motivation, four strands, comprehensible input, fluency, output, deliberate learning, time on task, depth of processing, integrative motivation, learning preferences. And the first one is motivation. Motivation is basically means the learner should be interested and excited about the learning and language. They should come to value this learning. And this idea highlights how important a learner's attitudes towards their studies, or towards a lesson, basically plays a key role in much time and effort students put into the learning. So basically some examples or some ways you can use motivation is make the subject matter of the lessons relevant and interesting to the students, give the learners some control and decision making over what they do, set tasks and clear outcomes with a high possibility of the learners completing them successfully. And next one is four strands. Basically, is what it means. It should include a roughly even balance of meaning, focus, input, language, focus, learning, meaning, focus, output, and fluency activities. This basically, this idea looks at how to divide among main parts of the language course, which is practicing understanding, learning about the language, practicing speaking or writing, and improving fluency. Oh, sorry. And the other part says a good guidelines to spend about the same amount of time on each of these four parts, and if the learner's overall language experience, this means that both class time and outside activities can be included if they can help the learner engage these parts. And next one is comprehensible input. Basically, what this means is there should be like a substantial quantities of interesting, comprehensible, receptive activity in both listening and reading. Um, the idea behind is this way of learning. The idea behind this way of learning a language is that learners should understand how the language works before they start using it. Some examples are have each student buy one book, then set up a way for them to temporarily swap books with each other so everyone can read different books. Another one is create a box for reading materials using articles from newspapers. Writing by students, and work from a group of teachers, then place these on cards or in plastic bags. Next one is fluency. Fluency is a language course should provide activities aimed at increasing the fluency which learners can use the language they already know, both receptively and productively. Basically, is an important goal in learning a language. Activities for fluency don't focus on teaching new words or rules. Instead, they help learners get better at using what they already know. In some ways, you can use this probably like reading, writing, listening, speaking. All those can be used in so many ways that fluency can be improved on and worked on as well. And the next one is output. Basically, the learner should be pushed to produce the language in both speaking and writing over a range of discourse types. Language knowledge needed to comprehend language is not the same as the language knowledge needed to produce language. An example for is a person learning English only needs to know a little about articles and prepositions to understand spoken or written English well. Deliberate learning. Basically what it means is it should include language-focused learning on the sound system, spelling, vocabulary, grammar, and the core areas. This focused attention can be on sounds, spelling, words, grammar, or how sentences are structured. Some examples to use: dictation, listening for particular words or phrases, memorizing dialogues and poems. Time on task. As much as possible should be spent using and focusing on the second language. The more time learners dedicate to learning a language, the better they get at it. This will help students see the target language to communicate instead of just something to study. Additionally, when learning English for specific reasons like only improving reading skills, it's important to focus a lot of time on reading practice. So basically just making as much time as possible for students' needs and having that sort of time to improve in areas that they are struggling in. Obviously, aside from the lessons, there should be at least time spent on focus on the language for them to at least practice it in the classroom. Next one is depth of processing. Learners should process the items to be learned as deeply and as thoughtfully as possible. Basically, what we remember depends on how well we think about things while we learn. If we think deeply about something, we are more likely to remember it. If we only think about it little, we will forget it quickly. For example, some ways you can use this is noticing, guessing from context, noticing a gap when speaking or writing, text highlighting, focusing on informal meaning using words cards, dictionary, or glossary lookup. Next one is integrative motivation. And basically, is used should be presented so that the learners have the most favorable attitude to the language, to users of the language, to the teacher's skill in teaching the language, and to their chance of success in the learning language. Effective factors are about feelings and attitudes. They include things like motivation, being shy about speaking a new language. And so it kind of just talks about that. And in some ways, to encourage students about this and creating a basic motivational conditions, generating initial student motivation. And so basically, it talks about how if learners don't like the language or they feel scared of using it, it can make them hard to learn. So these were some ways in how you can create a positive environment for students to feel comfortable to share and to do like activities in the classroom where they need to speak up, and that's a way that they can help them in the classroom. Learning preferences. There basically what it means is for learners to work with the learning material in ways that most suit their individual learning preferences. Student tackle activities in different ways based on things like what they've learned before, what they think will happen during tests, and how they see the learning task itself. Not all students are comfortable with the same learning methods, and they might learn better if they can choose how they learn. Some ways to incorporate are group size, for example, learning individually or with other learners. Speed and intensity, learning at a slow, thoughtful pace or at a fast, intensive pace. Basically having visual learning, auditory, hands-on, and just having what the students preferred their learning is and trying to make that as one for the class where each student is having their piece of type of preference in the lesson and where they feel more comfortable and more strength at. So moving on to the next topic, basically is monitoring and assessment. Basically, it improves strengths and weaknesses, meets student needs and goals. Basically, one of the points it talks about monitoring and assessment is ongoing needs and environment analysis and feedback. Ongoing needs and environment analysis, what it basically means is the selection, ordering, presentation, and assessment of the material in the language course should be based on continuing careful consideration of the learners and their needs, the teaching conditions, and the time resource available. The idea highlights how important it is to examine the environment and understand needs when planning a course. It depends how our classroom is set up, as well where the students can feel comfortable and be successful. Also, how the course will be presented or what the teacher wants the students to achieve at the end of the lesson. So basically how the environment is, how the teacher has the classroom set up, how positive the environment is where students can feel comfortable to learn and be more confident to be themselves in the classroom. And feedback, and lastly, feedback. And kind of basically what it means, learners should receive helpful feedback, which will allow them to improve the quality of their language use. And some questions as a feedback as a teacher, you can ask yourself are basically, do the learners have regular opportunities for careful language production? Do the learners have appropriate checklists or skills to monitor their written work? Has the teacher set up a peer checking system to make sure that the skills are reused? So these questions are some questions that you can use to basically help give feedback to students before you're getting a lesson, or you can prepare for it. And ways feedback can be done as well are basically a person watching how communication happens can give helpful feedback to those taking part. This person is usually the teacher, and the feedback can be about what was said or how the communication worked. It's basically a way the teacher can communicate back to the students by parts. And that way students are not confused and are receiving as much as feedback that they can receive on and their like whatever they took, like a test or assignment or activity. So yeah. And that was it. And my thoughts for this chapter, basically, I learned a lot and definitely things that I will use in the classroom, um, especially with mind reading assessment and stuff like that. And so that's something that I will use. So thank you.